Hi guys, it's David again with the AGsploration team, and I'm here today to teach you about the Undressing the Mystery of Meat activity. Just a couple things before we start the activity. You are going to need to know a couple terms that you might not be familiar with before you start teaching it. One thing we talk about is harvesting an animal. That's when we process the animal to be made into meat products. We harvest an animal just like we harvest field crops, corn, soybeans, or anything else. So that's the term we would use in terms of turning the animal into meat, harvesting them. The other things you're going to need to know are carcass. Carcass refers to the animal that's been skinned and had the internal organs taken out. So that's what that part of the animal is. The carcass is after it's been skinned and had the internal organs removed. And the dressing percentage is what we're really after today. And that's going to be the percentage based on what that carcass weight is divided by the live weight. And it's going to come out as a percentage. So that's different for all animals. But those are just helpful things to know as you work through the lesson, because we're going to refer to it several times. So now let's talk about the materials that you're going to need to do this lesson with the kids. It's pretty low input, there's not a whole lot. One thing you'll need is a paper plate or a cutting board or something to actually process the fruit that we're going to be dissecting on. You're going to need a digital scale. You can get these at any supermarket, most of the place, or Target or Walmart. The one thing with these digital scales, most of them require batteries, so make sure you have the right batteries and that they're working before you start the lesson. You're going to need some type of implement to process the fruit, whether it be a paring knife or a peeler. For younger kids, we'd probably suggest using a peeler, but the older kids can probably use a paring knife. You can also get safety knives to use as well, so that might help. And then you're going to need your piece of fruit. So you can use any type of fruit. We've come to like apples a lot. You can use them. You can use, for younger kids, if you don't want them cutting or peeling at all, you can use an orange and just have them use their hands to peel it. Or you can use a pear or something else, but any type of fruit will work. The last thing you're going to need is your data chart, because the kids are going to be recording stuff on that. That's in the lesson plan, and then have them have pencils or pens, and then they might need a calculator, or you can make them do hand calculations, whichever you think is best for your group. Okay, so the main part of this activity we call You Be the Butcher. Basically, instead of butchering an animal, we're going to butcher some fruit today and do the same process that any butcher at your supermarket, at your meat market would use to break that animal down into the cuts of meat that you take home. We're really looking at finding the dressing percentage of the animal, hence the Undressing the Mystery of Meat title. So for our process, we're going to use an apple today. The very first thing that the kids need to do is find the weight of their apple. We tend to use grams, and that's worked well, but you can use any measurement. But you're going to place the whole apple on your scale, and you'll want to record the weight. So it's 239 grams, and that's on your first data point on your chart. So record that. That's very important, because after they start cutting, you'll never be able to get that full weight again. So make sure they start with that. The next part of the activity is to get the skin off of the piece of fruit that you have. So you can use a peeler, you can use a paring knife. I'm going to use a peeler today, and they can just do as good a job as they can. And you want to collect all the peelings, because we're going to need to weigh them at the end. So this would be simulating kind of the similar way that you would dehide a steer or skin a hog that would be getting processed. And this is the first step that every butcher takes when they're getting ready to process an animal for meat. You can make each group assign people to do this, or you can just have them figure out, let everybody have a chance to do some of this too. Be good for your home ec classes too, if you're trying to teach them how to do things like this. So just keep collecting it all. Make sure you get all the skin. And you'll see that their next data column there is to record the weight of the skin. So once they've peeled it, have them take it all, place it on their scale, make sure it stayed on. And record the weight of that on your data chart. So we had 19 grams of skin. You can discard that or just lay it to the side if you want to keep it. But basically, you've done the first step that butchers take in processing an animal. The next thing that we're going to do is, besides taking the skin off or dehiding an animal, we also have to take out the internal organs. So we're going to collect that and then weigh that again next with the apple. So here's where you need a knife. But basically, any of the inedible parts on the inside we want to cut out and store as well to weigh. So I'm taking out the seeds, the stem, and just any parts that you wouldn't eat. And just like we did with the skin, place it on your scale. And get a weight for that. So that was 26 grams. After you've done that, you can take it and put it on your plate again. Then the last data column is to actually weigh just the edible fruit that's left. This would be all the meat products that your animals would produce and that you would eat. That's 194 grams. You can double check yourself by adding all that up to make sure that it equals it, and then the next part we'll talk about using the data sheet to create the next part of the activity. So we finished the hands-on part of the lesson, which was basically taking the whole apple and processing it down into the edible portion that's left, just like a butcher would do. Mainly the next part of the lesson they can do on their work data sheets. They should have collected all those weights. They can add them up and hopefully it'll match up to what their beginning weight was. Then they need to find the dressing percentage that they created from their apple. So the easiest way to do that is just take the amount of edible fruit left and divide it by the whole fruit weight. For my apple, I had a dressing percentage of 81%. Now this is going to be different depending on the groups in the classroom, and there's a lot of reasons and you could talk about for why this is different. But I might have cut all of the skin off where you left some of it on. I might have cut deeper to get the seeds and everything out and taken more out. This is the same thing that happens with animals when they get processed. Some people cut differently than others. Some people take more or less than things. So the dressing percentage of every animal is variable. It's also determined by the amount of fat on an animal and the other things like that, weight and things like that. So it's variable, and that's just one thing you can tell the kids, and you can talk about why it's so variable in between the groups. It'll also be variable if you use different types of fruits. You could give one group an apple to use, you could give one group an orange to use, and see how they vary in terms of what the average dressing percentages come out to. Once they find the dressing percentage, they're going to go and make a pie chart on their data sheet, and all the directions are spelled out as how to do that there, and you can just help walk them through that. They should be able to do it fairly easily. So you create that. As we work through then, there's just some summary questions that they can answer. You have all the answers to that too. There's certain average dressing percentages for all the animals that are included in there, and it talks about that. But basically, you can tell the kids they are now a butcher. They butchered fruit today, but they did the same process that any other butcher would use when they're getting ready to prepare that carcass. So hopefully we can draw a parallel so that they'll understand a little bit more about when they go to the grocery store and they look in the meat market, where that came from and how it got processed down from a whole animal. So we hope you enjoyed our Undressing the Mystery of Meat activity for the day. And for more helpful tips or to get any one of our other 21 lessons, you can go to our website. That's extension.umd.edu/AGsploration.